Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 30. We Need to Talk. When Ivy climbed their way onto the roof that evening, Eraserhead was already waiting for him like he had been every day after they'd poked fun at him for being late. He must have really been slowed down by that piece of cardboard. Honestly, they wished they were paying a little more attention. It probably would have been pretty funny to see him trying to scale the side of the building with an unwieldy sheet of cardboard. How did he even manage that? He was sitting on the ledge, slurping down a, quote, nutrient packet like he had been every evening, and like every evening, he tossed one to Ivy. He'd never seen them drink it, and they never asked for one, but he always had one for them. Whether he knew it or not, they were a lifesaver for Ivy. They'd been squirreling them away most of the time to pad up their stash of non-perishables, but the few they had actually eaten were delicious. They weren't exactly filling, but they had a good portion of their daily nutrient requirements, and they were leagues better than another granola bar for dinner. It had only been a week, but the kid was already making marked improvements. They couldn't quite win in an unarmed fight yet, but they were lasting longer and longer each round, and aside from not using his capture scarf, he wasn't going easy on them. They had a very productive patrol, for lack of a better word, but it was nothing they couldn't handle. Sakashi's phone was surely blowing up with the amount of times they'd called him to send someone out. Ivy seemed to be in good spirits by the time they normally called it for the night, and he was loath to bring them down, but they needed to talk. They'd been out every night for the past 10 days, barring the one night where he's pretty sure Ivy listened to him and took a break. They at least didn't call anything in to Sukashi, but that doesn't mean they didn't go out. He hadn't worked this much since he was fresh out of high school, and he was too old for this shit now. He learned his lesson about taking breaks, and he didn't need a reminder. He had spent years patrolling religiously until one night he was exhausted and he slipped up, and he ended up getting shot in the chest. 2 inches to the right, and the bullet would have gone straight through his heart. Coming to in the hospital and seeing Zashi's exhausted and tear-stained face was a wake-up call, and he couldn't keep going like that. He was going to get himself killed, and he couldn't do that to Zashi. He couldn't be the reason for those tears again. After that, he pulled back on his patrols and went to college part-time until he got a teaching degree, and he's been teaching at UA ever since. But if he never got that wake-up call, he wouldn't be here. He was lucky, incredibly lucky, and now he had to teach Ivy the same lesson he teaches all his students, and still has to remind himself every day. You can't save someone if you don't save yourself. Ivy, we can't be out here like this every single night. It's not sustainable, he started. As expected, Ivy glared at him before snapping back. Well, who the hell else is going to be out here, Eraser? Uptown survived without you for years. They can survive without you for one night a week. That's all I'm asking. We can take Sundays off, he suggested. That clearly wasn't the right thing to say. They looked even more offended. That might work for you in your old cushy neighborhood patrol, but there's no one to take our shift out here, Eraser. People are gonna die, and people are gonna notice us taking off. Crime is going to spike if we keep a schedule like that, they countered. That was a good point. They didn't hold a set patrol route, both so that they would be harder to pin down if someone was after them, and so that criminals never knew when they were close by, forcing them into paranoia. Taking the same day off every week would turn into the purge once people caught on. What if we took a random day off each week then? He paused, because the admission was painful even after all these years. You can't save everyone, kid, and you're not going to be able to save anyone if you run yourself into the ground. I honestly don't know how you've even lasted this long working every day for 10 months. Built different, they replied blankly. He couldn't help the exasperated "what?" that slipped out of his mouth unbidden. I'm built different. Simply get good, you geriatric. Their sentence was cut off by the end of his capture scarf, whipping them in the forehead. What the hell? They exclaimed as they rubbed the small red spot just above their left eyebrow. You could have hit me in the eye. He just stared at them, nonplussed, before continuing. I'm serious, Ivy. I don't care when, but we're going to have to take 1 day per week. And if I hear from Sukashi that you're still patrolling, I'm taking you in. I'm not going to let you get yourself killed, he said sternly. Their face fell, and they looked like they were stuck between furious and terrified at the threat. And he couldn't really blame them, saying that wasn't going to do wonders for their trust, but he knew that going into this. Unfortunately, their safety was more important than their trust. After a moment, the fury seemed to overpower the fear. What the hell, Eraser? Are you going to take me in or not? Do you just want to hold the threat above me whenever it suits you? What are you playing at? What are you even getting out of this? They spat back, their volume rising with each question. He took a deep breath before responding honestly. Nothing. I'm not playing at anything, and I'm not trying to get anything out of this. I just want you safe. That's it. I haven't lied to you, and I don't intend to. I don't want to bring you in, but if you're safer in custody, then that's where you'll go. Their eyes went steely, and for the millionth time in the last 10 days, he wished he could see their whole face because he couldn't read their expression at all. They looked and sounded completely void of emotion as they responded, I can tell you with 100% certainty that I will not be safer in custody. It almost sounded like a threat. Why the hell did that sound like a threat? Ivy, you can't save everyone. You're not stupid, and I know you know that. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I can tell you from experience that going on like this won't end well, he admitted. Ivy paused at that, but he still couldn't read them. There's no world in which this ends well for me, Eraser, they finally replied. Their voice betrayed no emotion, but he swore that he saw a flash of sadness in their gaze. The wind ruffled their hood as they maintained eye contact for a moment before looking down at the ground. I'll see you tomorrow, they said with finality before turning and walking away. Nothing about that conversation went well. Every word they said was vaguely concerning at best. Why did they say they wouldn't be safer in custody like that? Did they know that people in prison would be lining up to get revenge? Or did they mean... Oh, that didn't do well to think about. Ivy's mental health was already concerning. It would line up if that's what they meant. And in conjunction with their apparent resignation to die in these streets, it seemed all too clear that Ivy meant they would kill themselves before they let themselves get caught. Shit. Kami, he needed to talk to Zashi about this. Maybe he really did need to get Hound Dog involved. He couldn't get them sent to a mental institution on vague remarks. And even if he could, Ivy was far too slippery for him to trust anyone to keep a proper eye on them. Arresting them wouldn't help, and the kid was going to run himself into the ground no matter what he did. God, maybe he's reading into this too much. God, he hopes he's reading into this too much. He knew it was only a matter of time before the other shoe dropped. Eraser probably had a family or friends or something else waiting for him at home. Eraser had a home, of course. He wouldn't want to go gallivanting around on patrol every single night. He knew last Sunday wasn't going to be a one-off, but every week? How many people were going to die because he took a night off every week? What the hell would they even do with a night off every week? He knew he was right about needing to rest, but he was going to die in these streets whether he took a break or not. But more people would die after he was gone. If he died, he wouldn't be able to save anyone. He knew that's what Eraser meant, but how was he supposed to just live his life knowing every night he didn't go out, someone could have died? He wasn't sure which was more selfish, working himself to death so he wouldn't have to live with the guilt, or taking breaks and preserving himself for as long as he can while people he could have saved die in his stead. There was no winning in this situation, but he couldn't let Eraser make good on that threat. He would die before he gave up his freedom. End of chapter.